Before we begin today's story, let us know in the comment section what time and part of the world you are listening from. Also, if you enjoy today's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin. The evening sun cast long shadows across the city's bustling streets as Zach Morgan stepped onto the train, an action that would unknowingly alter the course of his life. At 38, he had everything society deemed successful: founding partner of Morgan & Associates law firm, adopted son of billionaire businessman Richard Morgan, and one of the youngest attorneys to make partner in the city's history. Yet something felt missing, a void he couldn't quite name. The leather briefcase in his left hand held contracts worth millions, while his right hand absently adjusted the expensive Patek Philippe watch on his wrist, a gift from his adoptive father on his last birthday. He hadn't taken public transportation since his college days, but his driver had called in sick, and something had possessed him to forego calling a car service. Perhaps it was nostalgia, or maybe fate had other plans. The train car swayed gently as it moved through the city. Zach loosened his tie, allowing himself to relax slightly. His mind wandered to the moment 25 years ago when Mr. Morgan, his father's best friend, had taken him in after the tragic accident that claimed both his parents. Richard Morgan had become more than just a guardian. He had been a father in every sense of the word, providing not just material comfort but genuine love and guidance. Lost in thought, Zach failed to notice the three young men who had been watching him since he boarded, their eyes fixed on his expensive watch and well-tailored suit. As he stepped off at his stop, they followed at a discreet distance. The station was surprisingly empty for that time of evening, their footsteps echoing in the concrete corridor. Just as Zach turned down a poorly lit street, a shortcut he vaguely remembered from his college days, they made their move. It happened so fast, rough hands grabbing his shoulders, pushing him against the cold brick wall. His briefcase clattered to the ground. "Nice watch, man," one of them sneered, reaching for his wrist. Zach's legal training hadn't prepared him for this. He struggled, more concerned about protecting the sensitive documents in his briefcase than the watch itself. A fist connected with his jaw, sending him stumbling. "Hey!" A female voice cut through the darkness like a knife. "Get away from him!" Through his slightly blurred vision, Zach saw a figure running toward them, phone raised high. "I'm calling the police! There are cameras everywhere!" The attackers, startled by the sudden intervention, quickly scattered into the darkness, leaving Zach slumped against the wall. His savior rushed to his side, a young woman with warm brown eyes and curly hair escaping from a chef's cap. "Are you okay?" she asked, helping him to his feet. Her voice was rich and concerned, with a slight musical quality to it. "I think so," Zach managed, touching his jaw gingerly. "Thank you." "Come on," she said, gathering his scattered belongings. "There's a pharmacy around the corner. We should get some ice on that jaw." Before Zach could properly process what was happening, she was leading him down the street to a small community pharmacy. The fluorescent lights inside made him squint, revealing the full beauty of his rescuer. She wore chef's whites under a light jacket, and despite the late hour, she carried herself with an energy that seemed to brighten the dingy store. She quickly purchased an ice pack and some antiseptic, refusing to let him pay. As she gently cleaned a small cut on his cheek, Zach found himself studying her face, the concentration in her eyes, the slight furrow of her brow, the gentle way her hands moved. "I'm Zach," he said, wincing slightly as she applied the ice pack. "Hold this," she instructed, placing his hand over the ice pack. She glanced at her watch and suddenly looked alarmed. "Oh no, I'm late. Will you be okay?" Before he could respond, she was already heading for the door. "Wait!" he called out. "I didn't get your name." But she was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of vanilla and spices in her wake. Zach stood there, holding the ice pack she'd bought him, feeling like he'd just experienced some sort of dream. For the next few days, Zach couldn't shake the memory of his mysterious rescuer. He found himself thinking about her at odd moments, during meetings, while reviewing contracts, even during his regular dinners with Collins at their father's mansion. Collins noticed his distraction but attributed it to the mugging incident, warning him about the dangers of public transportation. Then fate intervened again. Zach was leaving one of the Morgans' luxury hotels after a business dinner when he heard a commotion at the front desk. To his astonishment, there she was, his rescuer, now dressed in casual clothes but still carrying that same energy he remembered. The receptionist was calling security, and without thinking, Zach intervened. "Why are you harassing my guest?" he demanded, his attorney's authority sliding naturally into place. The receptionist stammered an apology, and Zach found himself escorting his former savior to the elevator. Up close, she was even more beautiful than he remembered. "Thank you," she said, looking slightly embarrassed. "I was trying to deliver some takeout to a regular customer, but their phone isn't connecting." "Let me help," Zach offered, pulling out his phone. As he helped her locate her customer, he learned her name was Debbie Jackson, and she owned a restaurant in the beachside community. The way her face lit up when she talked about her restaurant told him it was more than just a business to her. After she completed her delivery, Zach waited outside the hotel, telling himself it was just to ensure she got home safely. When she emerged, he offered her a ride home, and after some gentle persuasion, she accepted. The car ride gave them time to talk, and Zach found himself captivated by her passion for both cooking and art. She told him about her late father, a talented artist who had taught her to see beauty in everyday things, and her mother, whose cooking had inspired her career choice. When she finally recognized him as the man she'd rescued, they both laughed at the coincidence. The drive to her home felt both too long and too short. When they arrived, Debbie surprised him with an invitation to dinner. "Mom always cooks too much anyway," she said with a warm smile. "And her food is way better than any five-star restaurant in the city." Zach hesitated, aware of the mountain of work waiting for him at home, but something in her eyes made him say yes. It turned out to be one of the best decisions he'd ever made. The Jackson family home was modest but filled with warmth and character. Art covered the walls. Many pieces, he learned, were painted by Debbie's father. Her brother was there, practicing with his jazz band in the converted garage, and the house was filled with the mouth-watering aromas of home cooking. Mrs. Jackson welcomed him like a long-lost friend, insisting he take seconds and then thirds of everything. The conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by laughter and stories. It was so different from the formal dinners he was used to, where conversation centered around business deals and market trends. Throughout the evening, Zach found his eyes repeatedly drawn to Debbie. She moved through the kitchen with the same grace she brought to everything, helping her mother, teasing her brother, and making sure everyone's plate was full. When their eyes met across the table, he felt something stir in his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite name but didn't want to lose. As the evening drew to a close, Debbie walked him to his car. The night air was cool, and the sound of her brother's jazz music drifted softly from the house. They exchanged numbers, both trying to appear casual about it, but Zach's heart raced when their fingers brushed during the exchange. "Thank you for dinner," he said, lingering by his car door. "It was different from what I'm used to." "Good different or bad different?" she asked, a teasing smile playing at her lips. "Definitely good," he replied, finding himself drawn to that smile. "Very good." That night, as Zach lay in his perfectly appointed penthouse apartment, he couldn't stop thinking about the warm chaos of the Jackson home, the delicious food, the easy laughter, and most of all, about Debbie. Her smile, her kindness, the way she carried herself with such natural grace and confidence. He picked up his phone several times, composing and deleting messages, before finally setting it aside. But as he drifted off to sleep, he knew with certainty that he would see her again. What he didn't know was how completely she would change his life, or that the very next day, he would receive information that would put everything at risk. For now, though, he simply let himself remember the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed, the sound of jazz music floating through an open window, and the feeling that maybe, just maybe, He'd found what he'd been missing all along. The morning after their dinner together, Zach found himself staring at his phone during an important client meeting. His mind kept drifting to Debbie, to the warmth of her smile and the light in her eyes. Finally, during a break, he gathered his courage and sent a simple message. "Thank you for dinner last night. Your mother's cooking was incredible, but the company was even better." In her bustling restaurant kitchen, Debbie's heart skipped when her phone buzzed. She'd been checking it all morning, though she wouldn't admit that to anyone. Reading his message, a smile spread across her face, warming her cheeks. She replied, "Glad you enjoyed it. Mom hasn't stopped talking about the handsome lawyer who graced our dinner table." Their text exchanges became a daily ritual, starting with simple good morning messages and evolving into shared moments of their lives. Zach would send her pictures of his formal business lunches with witty captions about how much he missed her cooking. Debbie would respond with behind-the-scenes photos of her creating new dishes, sometimes with flour-dusted selfies that made him smile in the middle of serious meetings. One afternoon, while passing an art supply store, Zach remembered how Debbie had mentioned her father's influence on her art. He stopped, drawn to a display of leather-bound sketchbooks in the window. Inside, he found one with handmade paper and a rich brown leather cover that reminded him of her eyes. The shopkeeper wrapped it carefully in brown paper, while Zach imagined her reaction. He surprised her at her restaurant during a quiet afternoon, carrying the wrapped package. Debbie's face lit up when she saw him, but her eyes widened with curiosity at the package. "I brought you something," he said, placing it on the counter. When she unwrapped it, her fingers trembled slightly as they traced the soft leather. "How did you know?" she asked, emotion making her voice soft. "You mentioned your father was an artist, and I noticed you doodling on napkins during dinner that night. Thought you might like something proper to draw in." The thoughtfulness of the gesture moved her deeply. She immediately insisted on making him her newest pasta creation, a recipe she'd been perfecting. As they sat together in the quiet restaurant, Debbie opened up about her dreams for the place, how she wanted to combine her love for food and art, creating a space where local artists could showcase their work while people enjoyed good food. Their first official date came a week later. Zach took her to an art gallery opening, remembering her passion for art. Debbie wore a simple black dress that made his breath catch when he saw her. Throughout the evening, she surprised him with her knowledge of different art styles and techniques, speaking passionately about each piece they encountered. "You know," she said, studying a particularly striking painting, "my dad used to say that art is like love. It doesn't always make sense, but when it hits you, you just know it's right." Zach found himself staring at her profile instead of the artwork. "I think I'm beginning to understand what he meant," he said softly, causing her to blush. Their relationship fell into a comfortable rhythm. Zach would stop by her restaurant for breakfast whenever he could, sometimes bringing case files to review while she worked in the kitchen. She'd occasionally bring him lunch at his office, charming his entire staff with her warmth and delicious food. In the evenings, they often walked along the beach near her restaurant, talking about everything and nothing. These walks became their special time. One evening, as the sun was setting, Debbie shared stories about growing up in the community, about her father setting up his easel on the beach while she built sandcastles, about the way the ocean seemed to hold all her childhood memories. Zach, who had grown up in the privileged but somewhat sterile world of high society, found himself increasingly drawn to the genuine warmth and authenticity of Debbie's world. She taught him to see beauty in simple moments, in the way morning light filtered through the restaurant windows, in the sound of waves crashing on the shore, in the laughter of children playing on the beach. Their first "I love you" happened on a rainy evening. Debbie had invited Zach to help her test new recipes after hours. The restaurant kitchen was their private world, filled with the aromas of herbs and spices. She was teaching him how to properly taste a sauce, standing close behind him as she guided his hand holding the spoon. "Close your eyes," she instructed. "Really focus on the flavors." But Zach couldn't focus on anything except the warmth of her presence, the soft brush of her breath on his neck. He turned to face her, opened his eyes, and the words just came naturally. "I love you," he said simply, watching her eyes widen with surprise and then soften with emotion. "I love you too," she whispered back, and when they kissed, the sauce was forgotten entirely. That moment marked a shift in their relationship. Their love wasn't just about romantic dates or sweet messages anymore. It was about building a life together, about merging their two very different worlds. Zach found himself spending more time in her community than in his luxury apartment, drawn to the authentic connections and simple pleasures he found there. For Debbie, loving Zach meant learning to navigate his world of high-powered business meetings and formal events, but he always made her feel like she belonged exactly where she was. He valued her opinions, respected her work, and supported her dreams for her restaurant. What neither of them knew was that their love would soon face its greatest test, as the worlds they came from would collide in ways they never expected. But for now, they were simply two people falling deeper in love, creating their own story one shared moment at a time. The morning sun had barely risen when Collins called Zach into his office for an urgent meeting. The sleek conference room overlooking the city held blueprints spread across its polished surface, and Collins's excitement was palpable as he outlined the Morgan Real Estate's latest venture. "This is it, Zach," Collins declared, pointing to the plans. "The beachfront development project we've been planning. We're finally moving forward. The investors are all in." Zach's blood ran cold as he recognized the location, Debbie's community. The plans showed modern high-rises replacing the existing buildings, including her restaurant. The very place where he'd fallen in love would be demolished to make way for luxury condominiums and upscale shopping centers. "The view alone will triple property values," Collins continued, oblivious to Zach's growing distress. "We need you to handle the legal proceedings. Start with the eviction notices." Zach's throat felt dry. "Have we considered the impact on the existing community?" Collins looked at him strangely. "Since when do you worry about that? We're offering fair compensation. Besides, that area is severely underutilized. This development will bring jobs, tourism, revenue." That evening, Zach sat in his office long after everyone had left, the eviction notices sitting unsigned on his desk. Every time he reached for his pen, he saw Debbie's face, heard her voice talking about her dreams for the restaurant, remembered the way she spoke about the community's history. He began avoiding her calls, making excuses about work. When they did meet, he felt the weight of his secret crushing him. She would talk about her plans for the restaurant's future, and each word felt like a knife in his heart. The pressure from Collins mounted daily. "The investors are getting impatient," he would remind Zach. "We need those notices out by the end of the month." Unable to bring himself to sign the notices, Zach assigned another attorney from his firm to handle them. He told himself he was protecting Debbie, that he would find a way to stop the development before it was too late. But deep down, he knew he was just postponing the inevitable. One rainy morning, as Debbie sorted through her mail at the restaurant, she found the envelope that would shatter everything. The Morgan Real Estate logo caught her eye first, then the law firm's letterhead, Morgan & Associates Law Firm. Her hands trembled as she read the eviction notice, her world crumbling around her. She Googled the law firm, and there it was, Zach's smiling face on the website, listed as founding partner. Everything clicked into place. His reluctance to discuss certain aspects of his work, the way he'd sometimes grow quiet when she talked about her future plans. The bell above the door chimed, and she looked up to see Zach walking in, shaking rain from his umbrella. One look at her face told him everything. "You knew," she said quietly, holding up the notice. "All this time, you knew they were going to destroy everything." "Debbie, please let me explain." "Explain what?" Her voice cracked with emotion. "How you've been lying to me for months. How you sat here, ate my food, met my family, all while knowing your firm was working to take everything away from us." "I've been trying to stop it." Zach stepped forward, but she backed away. "I've been fighting for—" "Don't," She cut him off, tears streaming down her face. Just don't. I trusted you, Zach. I loved you. But you're just like all the other suits who see nothing but dollar signs where people's lives exist. That's not true. What I feel for you is real. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away as if his touch burned. Please leave, she whispered, the pain in her voice cutting deeper than anger ever could. I need you to leave. The following weeks were a blur of misery for both of them. Zach threw himself into work, staying late into the night, searching desperately for legal loopholes, alternative solutions, anything to stop the development. But every path seemed blocked, every option exhausted. Debbie immersed herself in her restaurant, cooking with a fierce determination as if every dish might be the last she'd serve in the space her father had helped her create. She avoided the beach, couldn't bear to look at the ocean that had once brought her so much peace. The community rallied around her, organizing protests and petition drives. Each time Zach saw news coverage of their efforts, he felt the weight of his betrayal more heavily. He would drive by the restaurant late at night, seeing the light still on in the kitchen, knowing she was there, but unable to bridge the gulf between them. Collins noticed his brother's distraction and confronted him. This isn't like you, Zach. You've never let personal feelings interfere with business before. Maybe that's the problem, Zach responded, his voice hollow. Maybe I've been doing business wrong all along. The development plans continued to move forward, seemingly unstoppable. Each day brought new papers to sign, new meetings to attend, new pressure from investors. But Zach could no longer see the profit margins and projected returns. All he saw was the community he'd grown to love being torn apart, and the woman he loved slipping further away. One evening, as rain pounded against his office windows, Zach stared at a photograph on his desk, a candid shot of Debbie laughing in her kitchen, taken what felt like a lifetime ago. In that moment, he knew he had to make a choice between the world he'd been born into and the one he'd found with her. He reached for his phone and made a call that would either save everything or cost him everything. Mr. Morgan, we need to talk about the development project and about what's right. I'll continue the story from where you left off, developing Act 4, resolution and the epilogue, with a focus on the emotional and romantic atmosphere. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Mr. Morgan's office as Zach entered, his heart pounding but his resolve firm. The office remained unchanged from his childhood memories, the imposing mahogany furniture, the city sprawling below, and most importantly, the photograph that had caught his eye thousands of times before. His biological father and Mr. Morgan, arms around each other's shoulders, both beaming at the camera. "You wanted to see me, son?" Mr. Morgan looked up from his desk, his voice carrying the familiar warmth that had comforted Zach through his darkest days after losing his parents. "Yes, sir. It's about the beachfront development project." Zach's voice was steady, despite the emotions churning inside him. Mr. Morgan leaned back in his chair, studying the young man he'd raised as his own. "Collins mentioned you've been having concerns. We need to stop it," Zach said firmly, moving to stand before the desk. "That community, it's special. The people there, they've built something beautiful, something real. Business isn't about sentiment, Zach. You know that better than most." Mr. Morgan's voice was gentle but firm. "If this project goes through," Zach took a deep breath, steeling himself, "Morgan and Associates will withdraw as your legal representation." Mr. Morgan's eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me, boy?" "No, sir." Zach walked to the photograph on the wall, his fingers tracing the frame. "I'm standing up for what I believe in. What I know is right." He turned to face his adoptive father. "My father taught me that before he died. You've told me stories about how he always fought for the little guy, how he believed in justice over profit." Mr. Morgan stood and joined him at the photograph. "James was a stubborn idealist," he said softly, referring to Zach's father. "Nearly drove me crazy sometimes with his principles. He was right though, wasn't he? That's why you took me in when he died. because you believed in those principles too." For a long moment, Mr. Morgan was silent, studying the photograph. Finally, he turned to Zach. "You're in love with someone there, aren't you?" "Yes," Zach admitted, his voice softening. "Her name is Debbie. She owns a restaurant there. But this isn't just about her. It's about what's right. About the kind of man I want to be. The kind of man you and my father raised me to be." Mr. Morgan walked back to his desk and pressed his intercom. "Janet, get me the development team. And Collins. We need to discuss some changes." 2 weeks later, Zach stood outside Debbie's restaurant in the pouring rain. Through the window, he could see her working in the kitchen, her hair tied back, focused on her cooking, as she had been the first time he'd eaten there. Taking a deep breath, he walked in. She looked up at the sound of the bell, her expression freezing when she saw him. "We're closed," she said automatically. "I know," he replied, pulling out a folder from his coat. "But I needed to give you this." She reluctantly took the folder, opening it to find official documents. As she read, her eyes widened. "The Morgan Real Estate Development has officially withdrawn all development plans for this area," Zach explained, his voice soft but clear. "Furthermore, they're establishing a community development fund to help local businesses upgrade their facilities while maintaining the area's character. Your restaurant is first on the list for renovations, if you want them." Debbie looked up, disbelief written across her face. "How?" "Mr. Morgan." He remembered something important. "Sometimes the best investments aren't about money." Zach paused, his voice softening. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you the truth from the beginning. I was scared. Scared of losing you, scared of failing. But I should have trusted in us, in what we have." "You did this for me?" she asked quietly. "For you, for this community, for what I believe in." He stepped closer, his heart in his throat. "I love you, Debbie Jackson. I love your passion, your creativity, your kindness. I love how you see beauty in everything, how you've taught me to see it too. These past weeks without you have been empty, and She cut him off by closing the distance between them, pulling him into a kiss that tasted of forgiveness and new beginnings. 1 year later, the restaurant was packed for the grand reopening. The renovation had transformed the space while preserving its soul, the warm, inviting atmosphere that had first drawn Zach in. New floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the ocean, and a proper gallery space showcased local artists' work, including some of Debbie's own paintings. The old brick walls remained exposed but restored, telling the story of the building's history while embracing its future. In the center of it all stood Zach and Debbie, now husband and wife, greeting guests. Their wedding 6 months ago had been a beautiful blend of their two worlds, held on the beach at sunset, with jazz music playing softly as they exchanged vows. Mr. Morgan had walked Debbie down the aisle, her own father's favorite painting serving as a backdrop to their ceremony. "Can you believe this?" Debbie whispered to Zach, squeezing his hand as they watched the crowd enjoying themselves. Mr. Morgan was there with Collins, both men having become regulars at the restaurant. Debbie's brother's jazz band played in the corner, and her mother was in the kitchen, teaching the new sous chefs her secret recipes. "Happy?" Zach asked, his arm around his wife's waist, his hand resting protectively over her slightly swollen belly. Their first child was due in 5 months. "Perfect," she replied, leaning into him. The renovation had been a labor of love. Zach had worked alongside the contractors, often rolling up his sleeves after long days at the office to help with the restoration. Debbie had overseen every detail, ensuring that while the space was modernized, it retained the warmth and character that made it special. The Community Development Fund had transformed more than just the restaurant. Other local businesses had received support for improvements, and the entire neighborhood had been revitalized while maintaining its unique character. The beach remained public, now with improved access and facilities, ensuring everyone could continue to enjoy the ocean view that had sparked so much change. 3 years later, the beach was quiet, except for the sound of children's laughter. Zach and Debbie sat on a blanket, watching their twins, James and Morgan, building sandcastles while their 1-year-old sister, Grace, crawled between them, attempting to eat fistfuls of sand, despite their vigilance. "Sometimes I still can't believe how everything turned out," Debbie said, leaning against her husband's shoulder. The restaurant had become a cultural landmark in the community, famous not just for its food but for its support of local artists. Zach's law firm had shifted its focus to community development and protecting small businesses while still maintaining its prestigious reputation. "I do," Zach replied, pulling her closer. "The moment you saved me from those thugs, I think the universe was trying to tell me something." "Oh? And what was that?" "That sometimes the best things in life come from unexpected places. That love isn't just about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's about fighting for what matters, being honest, and choosing each other every day." James ran up to them, his dark curls full of sand. "Daddy, come help us. We're building a castle like the one in the picture." Zach laughed, kissing Debbie's cheek before getting up. The picture was a painting of a fantastical sand castle that Debbie had created, now hanging in the kids' playroom at home. Their house, a comfortable beachfront property walking distance from the restaurant, was filled with art, some from local artists, some from Debbie herself, who had found time to pursue her passion for painting between running the restaurant and raising their family. As Zach helped his son pack wet sand into towers, he caught sight of Collins walking down the beach with his own children. The cousins played together regularly, and the family bonds had only grown stronger since the development project's transformation. Mr. Morgan spent every Sunday evening at their family dinners, delighting in his grandchildren, and often reminiscing about Zach's father with stories that made everyone laugh and cry. Debbie watched her husband playing with their children, Grace now settled in her lap, contentedly playing with a seashell. The restaurant still hosted family dinners every Sunday, where laughter and love flowed as freely as good food and wine. On quiet evenings, she would still go up to the roof to sketch, now often accompanied by Zach and their children, adding new chapters to their love story against the backdrop of the ocean they'd fought to protect. The community had flourished. The development fund had helped establish art programs for local children, and Debbie's restaurant regularly hosted exhibitions for emerging artists. Zach's law firm had become known for its pro bono work supporting small businesses and community initiatives, earning a different kind of respect than the one it had originally been built on. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the water, Zach returned to the blanket with their tired but happy children. James and Morgan curled up on either side of their mother, while Grace dozed in her father's arms. "Mrs. Morgan," Zach said softly, using the name that still made her smile, "I'd say we did pretty well for ourselves." "Indeed we did, Mr. Morgan," she replied, leaning over to kiss him as their children made exaggerated sounds of disgust. Their story became a testament to the power of love, not just between two people, but for a community, for principles, and for the beauty of fighting for what you believe in. They had indeed found their happily ever after, not in grand gestures or fairy tale moments, but in the simple, everyday magic of choosing love, truth, and each other, time and time again.